enjoy this talk given at the Austin Center for Spiritual Living, where we live and teach the principles of science of mind and spirit. For more information, visit austincsl.org.
All these things God is, I am. All these things God is, you are. Now, if that's the whole story, I mean, that is the eternal sermon itself. So let's just let it go at that. I won't give a sermon this morning, and we'll have some of the wonderful sweets and cookies and coffee and tea and all over there. But you know, I can't let go of this because I prepared a sermon for this morning. Kind of. Anyway, it's wonderful. Wonderful to see all of you here. It's always wonderful to see you here. You know, we've all heard this. Many of us, well, it's from the field of psychology, and many of us have had courses in psychology. And we've learned that there are two basic fears. And these are what we call the natural fears, if you will. And do you know what they are? Fear of loud noises. And we're born with this. And a fear of falling. And other than that, all of the other fears, and there are many, many fears, we create ourselves. It's the decision that we make about what it is we're going to be afraid of. We have a tremendous vocabulary here. All these, they're phobias. They're called phobias. They're like, there's claustrophobia. You know what that is. Close spaces. And then there's agoraphobia, that is wide spaces. And I've often wondered, is there a agoraphobia where you're afraid of wide spaces and confined spaces? I have no name for that unless it's agoraphobia. But can you imagine being that way? And then there is, here's one I like. No, I don't like it because I don't have this. I could never have this. It's called allurophobia. That's fear of cats. And I have 4 cats. And I love my cats. So, there are all kinds of things. Hematophobia. Astrophobia, afraid of thunder and lightning. It goes on and on and on. But there is one particular phobia that I think is probably the worst that any of us can have and embrace and allow to influence our life, and that's the fear of failure. And yet it's one that seems to be so deeply embedded within a lot of people. The Bible talks about fear, and the Bible talks about love. And do you know that fear is mentioned more times in the Bible than love is? So it makes you wonder about the people that kind of put these things together, what the dominant ideas in their mind were. There's 396 times that the word fear is used and 304 times that the word love is used in the Bible. Now, I know you wanted to know that. You might write that down. So you might be on one of these programs, deal with trivia sometime. But this whole idea of fear, it's so prevalent in the minds of so many people, and it has a tendency to erode the way we see ourselves, because when we're fearful, we cannot see ourselves as we truly are. What we do is we don't recognize the beauty and the magnificence of who each one of us is and who each other is in our experience. And when we are coming from that, it can only erode, in the erosion of our viewpoint and our understanding and our own personal vision of life itself, we find it's impossible to be very affirmatively oriented toward life. It's difficult to be positively oriented toward life, and we're not positively oriented toward life. We're not oriented toward accepting the kind of successes that are available to us for our, if you will, for our acceptance. One of the interesting things is that what we dwell on in life is what we experience. I have a friend that wrote a book. His name is Robert Anthony, and the book was entitled The Ultimate Secrets of Total Self-Confidence. And he's written several books around basically that theme. And he makes a statement in that particular book that I like very much, and it's one I think that it's worth remembering. He says, Your life reflects your dominant thoughts. Take that and think about it a little while. Let that be ingrained in your mind. Your life reflects your dominant thoughts. What are your dominant thoughts? What are you usually thinking about? Is it wonderful, light, uplifting, loving, giving things? Or is it fear and doubt and trepidation and worry about a lot of other things? So much depends on how we are going to relate, how we're going to see things in life. There's a story of two salesmen. These two salesmen were sent to Africa by their company to sell shoes. And 3 days after they get there, one of the salesmen hops on the next plane home. You know, he was there, he tried to sell shoes, he went back home and he told me, he says, you know, you just can't sell shoes to these people over there. They all go around barefoot all the time. And the other one, he was still over there. And finally, after a couple of weeks, the head office received this envelope within which there were 50 or so orders for shoes saying, send more order blanks. He says, this place is a gold mine. Nobody over here wears shoes. Isn't that interesting? It's a difference in the shift of our viewpoint. And a lot of people don't see things like that. You know, our attitude, giving our dominant thoughts to failure is bound to direct us toward those things that are going to cause us to fail. And when you give your dominant thought to failure, that's what you're thinking about all the time. How can you see the possibilities and the opportunities that God has provided for all of us? The universe is constructed in such a way that it's going to continue to expand and express according to the very nature of itself. And the nature of you, as you begin to examine it, is one of magnificence, capability, talent, and skill. And I can go on and on and on. All of those things, God is, I am, is the song that we sang a few moments ago. And we don't want to believe that. Instead, we have a tendency sometimes to move toward thinking in the way that we have been conditioned to, or other people around us think, and after a while we begin to adopt that. And remember, giving your dominant thoughts to whatever it happens to be is what's going to show up for you in your life. Failure is rehearsed by constant repetition. And so I have to ask you, how many times a day do you think about failing? What a failure I've been. I just can't do this. I've never been able to do that. I don't have enough education. I'm not young enough, or I'm too old. How often have we repeated those kinds of things to ourselves over and over and over? Or I'm not good looking enough. I've never had that problem. But no, really. I mean, I heard one person say, "Well, I'm just, I'm just so homely," and I looked at the person. I thought about that. I wasn't going to comment. I could say, "Oh, no, you're not," and then they're going to get into it with me and tell me how homely they are, and then after a while, of course, they begin to appear homely, and I'll have to agree with them. And I like to stay away from that. I don't want to reinforce their negative viewpoint. But I have never seen a homely person who smiles a lot. Isn't that interesting? You want to become instantly better looking? Smile. Let's all smile. Isn't that great? You just feel better. Something happens in the body when you smile. It's kind of like acknowledging the joviality of life and the creativity of life and the goodness of life when you do that. We rehearse over and over and over different attitudes, different ideas, and they become reflected in our life. I remember one time, I grew up with a father who was a very positive kind of guy. He was constantly correcting me. He says, "Richard, don't say that. Don't say that. That's not good. You say that, you're going to believe it, and if you say it long enough, it's going to come true in your life." And I remember one time, however, I had an interesting experience with him. I was a young man. I was in college at the time. I'd just gotten out of the Navy, going to college. We were building a home, a summer home, that they finally got enough resources together to build this home in the Santa Cruz Mountains on the San Lorenzo River in California. And it was a nice area. And we were working on it, and we'd gotten as far as the roof, and we were putting down shingles. And my father was up there and he'd been working hard at it, and it was a long day, and he was a little bit tired and all, and he was doing something. He said, "Damn it, I just can't do anything." Dad, don't say that. That's negative. And you say it, you're going to believe it, and it'll come true. He says, "Oh, shut up." That's what I heard from him all my life, Yeah, I was shocked at that. But it's easy to get caught up in the negativity of things, isn't it? Okay, so you do. Stop it. Remember the talk I gave a while back? The whole theme was, stop it. And people are usually walking around looking for some deep psychological interactions that they can deal with and handle and analyze and do. I said, stop it. We can do that with ourselves. There was a comment that was made by Lily Tomlin. You remember the comedian Lily Tomlin? She's still around. You don't see her much anymore. She says, "Sometimes I worry about being a success in a world of mediocre people." She said that humorously, but there's a real meaning there, isn't there? There's real insight in that, because mediocre is kind of like that middle of the ground. You never beyond too much. You work hard to not fall below that line, and you can feel like you're right there with the average. Who wants to be average? Do you want to be average? Or is average really comfortable for you? It means you don't have to push. You don't have to dig down deep and find what those unique characteristics are that you possess, most of which you already know, some of which will be revealed if you begin to stretch and push. Because that may mean that it'll make you a little bit uncomfortable, that could just possibly lead you to making a contribution that you never made before and be a success in life. And heavens, we don't want to really do that, do we? There are three things that I want to address here. Of course, I've addressed a half a dozen so far. But these are three basic ideas and three things that we can do. And the first thing, what comes to mind is a comment for the first thing. That's to know the truth about yourself. And what comes to mind is this quotation from Ralph Waldo Emerson, where he said, "What lies before you and what lies behind you are small things compared to what lies within you." Wow. We read things like that. We hear things like that. They sound good, and then we forget them. But every once in a while, we have to sit back and look at our life and say, I know where I've been. I have some idea of where I'm going, and that's important because that's where I'm going to live the rest of my life. But where am I, and what am I in this moment, and what can I do about... It's not permitted to yawn. I'm joking with you. Take your hand away from your mouth immediately. But what lies before you and what lies behind you are small things compared to what lies within you. Know the truth about yourself. Know the truth, and it shall set you free. Know the truth of what lies within you. And what lies within you you're magnificent. I don't know the details of that, but you can discover them just by showing up and being available to life, so that it can be revealed in your experience. And that's what happens. We reinforce this realization of ourselves through the spiritual practices that we talk so much about here. meditation, prayer, affirmation. You know, when we meditate, we get quiet, we shut up, and we listen, and we make ourselves available. And we are inspired through what is revealed out of the silence. And in prayer, we take it the next step. We've got something from our new insight. And in prayer, it's a proactive activity. We initiate some kind of a process that's going to move us forward in the direction of what that inspiration is. And then daily we affirm over and over and over, reminding ourselves, you know what? Your life is going to reflect what your dominant thought is. And that's what this business of affirmation is. And yet we scatter ourselves all over the place. What is your dominant thought? Oh, well, 1 minute's this and 1 minute's that and 1 minute. But doesn't everybody think that way? No. All of us have streams of thought that go on, but some people have the ability to quiet themselves and give their attention. And it's just a matter of practicing this. That's why I say meditate to get clear. And then pray according to the inspiration. And then daily remind yourself of what it is you are looking at, where you are going. Remember, you can only hold one thought at a time. And people say, like I've already mentioned, a lot of people say, well, I can hold many different streams of thought. You can't hold them. You can jump around between them. Okay? That's the first thing there. Get clear on who you are. Clarify your vision. Learn something about how to open yourself to the spirit of life. It'll show up to you, for you, in your meditation. And the second thing is this whole business of failure. You are going to fail. There is no question about it. What is failure? It's not accomplishing what you think it is that you need. And maybe you do need it, maybe you don't need it. But that's basically what it is to fail. It sounds different, doesn't it? Failure has that connotation of really being something that is going to reflect very badly on you. But failure is just not accomplishing the things or acquiring the things or whatever it is that you think are important for you in your life to express who you are. And it's going to happen. So be willing to failure. Failure, you see, is the opportunity to see, to grow, to develop, to create, to move in new directions, to change, so that you can see life a little bit different from the way you may have seen it before. Thomas Edison is famous for having, this is said about him, and he made similar comments about himself, that he failed far more than he ever succeeded. But he had an attitude about that. When he failed at something, his comment was, that's just one thing he found, one more thing that didn't work. So you check that off his list. It's kind of a nice way to look at it. Okay, that didn't work. Next, a wonderful word, by the way, next. You come to a certain place in life and you find yourself up against it. Say, next. How about that for a relationship? Those of you that have been in different relationships over the years. Oh, my heart is broken. Next. That's not too bad an attitude, is it? Failure is the opportunity to see in new ways. I read an article a number of years ago in a business magazine, and the fellow was talking about or the author, I don't know if it was a guy or a girl, he was talking about a thing called a catastrophe report. And this is an aid in being able to help people into making decisions. You create it in your mind kind of in such a way that he dubbed this thing a catastrophe report. You ask yourself 3 questions. First question is, what's the worst that can possibly happen? good question. A lot of people say, I don't want to think negatively. Don't tell me negative thought. Well, hey, you know, doesn't that disgust you when you get around people like that? It always, you're feeling badly and you say something about, don't think negatively. And I want to hit them. I'm much too holy for that, but I want to, you know. First thing, what's the worst that can happen? What's the worst possible thing that can happen out of this? And then you turn it right around and ask another question. What's the best that can happen? And then you look at the difference and ask yourself, what's the risk involved? What's the worst that can happen? What's the best that can happen? And what's the risk? And that puts things in perspective, doesn't it? You see, doing this clarifies your understanding of what it is you're really wanting to do and some of the circumstances that might exist around it. And it prepares you mentally to meet the challenges, at least some of the challenges that are going to show up in your life. It doesn't mean that you arrive at the point where you're not going to fail or you can't expect to fail, because that is going to happen. I have a good friend of mine who is a world-class consultant, and she gives workshops and does processes for companies, multinational companies around the world. And I remember sitting in on one of her seminars one time, and she was talking about failure, and she says, you know, if you're never failing, you're probably playing it too safe. And you're not really reaching far enough. You know, I never forgot that. Successful people fail. And like Edison, maybe they fail a lot more than they succeed. But boy, when they succeed, you know about it and the world knows about it. Booker T. Washington, great philosopher, activist, we would call him today, back in the early part of the last century. He said, you know, I've learned that success is not to be measured by the position one has reached in life, as much as it is by the obstacles one has overcome while trying to succeed. It's interesting. It's interesting to relate success in that way, because in that way he puts it, he's not necessarily saying that you accomplished anything in particular, but it has to do what's moving within you and the effort that you put into it. Now the accomplishment has got to come. And if it doesn't come, then maybe you haven't bit off enough. You know, what was it, Paramahansa Yogananda said, in my life, I always bite off more than I can chew, and then I chew it. Isn't that wonderful? Okay, so that's the second thing. The first thing is know the truth about yourself. The second thing is be willing to fail. And the third thing is really simple. Just lighten up. You know, most of us take ourselves so serious. And religion, to a lot of people, is serious stuff. You know, it has that profound idea about it. I remember a woman that came to church one time and she just loved it there. You could see her beaming as she was coming out the door. And it was second or third time, and she says, you know, Mr. Imprescia, I love coming here, but it's just not like coming to church. I says, oh, why? And she says, well, I go away feeling so good about myself. Can you imagine? Yeah, we take religion too seriously. What should be light and exciting and uplifting and happy and jovial, very often we expect it to be kind of dark and heavy. We're looking for something more serious. I'm convinced that, and I don't even know how to explain this, but I'll try, that God has a sense of humor. Now, I don't think of God as an entity out there that I'm going to turn to that I can talk about as him or her or she or he. That my God is not an entity somewhere in the universe looking down upon me and pulling the strings on all the activities that go on. My God is a presence. It's a consciousness that embodies and supports us all, and I don't understand it, except that the more I can feel that presence, the more I find something activated within me that allows me to perceive my life in such a way that it becomes better and better. And the farther I go along this line, the less I understand about it, and the happier I seem to be in the experience of life. And you know, I'm an engineer. By training, I'm an engineer scientist. Undergraduate school, graduate school, lots of my activities that I do even today are oriented around that. And I want things lined up and in order. I have to let go of that stuff. You know, if my wife gives me a project to build something in the backyard, well, then my engineering will come into it. After that, I let her direct. She never does it the way I know she wants me to do it. I never do it the way I know she wants me to do it, but she gets her way, and boy, does that make my life better. But I am convinced that the universe does have a sense of humor. And I don't know how to explain this except by way of giving an example. A number of years ago, a really, really dear friend of mine who's very, very close, well, it's my former wife, and she's still a good friend of mine, and we talk every once in a while. She was very sick, and she was in the hospital, and we didn't expect her to live. I did, but I was fearful, so maybe I was not wanting to really face that possibility. And the hospital was very near where I worked. I was working in Los Alamos at the time, and the hospital was on one corner, and the building I worked in, the chemistry and metallurgy building, was at the other corner, just about 100 yards away. And so I'd be able to go down there several times a day to see her in the hospital. And I remember this one afternoon, I walked into her room, and it was an incredible experience that I had, because as I walked into the room, it was like there was an atmosphere of joviality. And she was smiling. And I thought, oh, and you know, this is a strapping woman, about 5'7", weighed about 135 pounds. Normally she was down to under 90 pounds. And we were really concerned about her. And I walked over to her and I looked at her and she was smiling. And she looked at me and she said, "Do you feel it?" And I did. I didn't know what it was I was feeling, but there was this atmosphere of joviality. And this is what I talk about or think about as being God having a sense of humor. I don't know how to explain that except that there was just an upliftment about it. You see, and I think that this is built into the atmosphere, built into the universe, built into this context that we call the human's experience of the universe. That it's kind of like a safety valve that's always there, and we're not aware of it, but at some point we reach a certain point where the safety valve is available to us and tension is relieved, and it allows us to laugh at our fears. Yeah. Blaise Pascal, the 17th century mathematician and philosopher's comment that I've mentioned before. God is a comedian playing to an audience that is afraid to laugh. Isn't that interesting? And William James, the father of American psychology, over 100 years ago, made the comment that we laugh because we're happy, and we're happy because we laugh. It just goes round and round, doesn't it? George Blakely, I think it is, 17th century Scottish philosopher, made the comment, it's similar to that sends you thinking in circles, where he said, the only thing we perceive are our perceptions. Take that and work with it a little bit. But it's that same idea. We laugh because we're happy, and we're happy because we laugh. And who makes the choice to laugh? And who makes the choice of what it is we are going to perceive? That's what we're going to experience. So, what does this all lead up to? Real simple. Face your failures. Face your fears. Lighten up. And above all, know that truth from Ralph Waldo Emerson, that what lies before you and what lies behind you are small matters compared to that which lies within you. Let's quiet ourselves now for an affirmative prayer. This is really the healing part of our service. And if you have something that you are dealing with in your life that is an issue for you, that's a difficulty, bring it up and look at it. Don't deny it. And tell yourself the truth, that this is the experience I'm having now, but it's not what I am. I am magnificent. Failure is my stepping stone. Any failure that I perceive is a failure because I see it as such. And it is a stepping stone to experiencing a more fulfilled life. And it's all a joy. I live, I move, and I have my being within this field of joviality. I am part of the laughingness of God. Wow, what ideas. Now quiet yourself within that field of understanding, whatever your level of understanding may be of it. And tell yourself, I give myself over to the truth of life. I open my mind so that I experience the magnificence of myself as a life-giving spirit made in the image and likeness of that which made everything. That's what I am. All those things God is, I am. God is power, presence, passion, love, joy, creativity, and intelligence, and more. And all these things God is, I am. I for the moment sweep aside anything that stands in the way of that affirmation of the truth of me. And I allow there to emerge the full realization of my oneness, my unity, my identification with the wholeness of God. And in that realization, I know my oneness with all. And everywhere I look, I see the face of God expressing. Wow. What a wonderful realization that the totality of it is right now. not in the past, not something that I seek in the future, but it's right now. I show up, and it, with a capital I realize has already shown up for me. Let that be your thought. Let that be your dominant thought. I show up for life, and life has already shown up for me in its totality. And in the realization of that, I know that any imbalance in my life, whether it is physical, in my body, mental, in my mind, or externally surrounding me, any imbalance is instantly harmonized. For God is all there is perfect harmony and balance. Therefore, that's what I am. And in all ways, I am made whole right now. I'm so grateful for the realization of this truth. I know that it is so. I accept that it is so. I allow it to be so. And we together can confidently declare, and so it is.